Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video we want to be making a healer tier list of Mythic Plus healers in the current season, but we'll be going about it a little bit differently than what you might see in the usual tier list where you speak about raid buffs and different abilities and how they interact and so on. What we'll be doing here is just look at the raw data and see how the different specializations perform or actually have performed in a real dungeon healing environment. And we'll be doing so considering 4 separate data points. First of all, overall healing throughput. So what are these specializations actually capable of healing in terms of raw numbers? Then how much damage can they do, which obviously will affect the final rating of our tier list at a lower degree, but I think it's still a point that might be considered. Then we'll be looking at spec representation, that is, how do these different capabilities of the specs actually trickle down into what players are doing. This is a bit representing perhaps difficulty of the spec. Representation drops when the rotation might, if perfectly played, heal a lot, but it's not easy to perfectly play it and so on. So at a low weight we will also look at the representation to make our verdict in the end, and then we will, which is quite important, also consider the maximum key level done by specialization to see if played to perfection or as near as any one of our players is able to get toward perfection, then what can these specializations actually do. So let's begin with healing. I picked Floodgate. We look at Warcraft logs healing for the highest HPS achieved by these specializations in the Operation Floodgate dungeon, because Floodgate has a very high healing requirement and I think represents this rather well, but these values map very well onto the other dungeons as well. So what we can see from the top 10 healing values from these dungeons averaged out is that Oracle Priest is actually, even after the nerfs, very far ahead at an average of 2.1 million HPS. Resto Druid is actually rather competitive, placing it in A tier, slightly below, so I think a 6% reduction. You might argue that with some variants it could also be on par with Oracle Priest, but 6% is actually quite a lot. It's not that little, it's just because all the other differences are so large that it appears smaller than it is. And then we have Mistweaver at minus 11%, and then we have a pretty steep drop-off already with Resto Shaman at negative 17%, only being able to pump out an average of 1.75 million HPS, and the other 3 specializations are really far off at around negative 25% lower than Oracle Priest, justifying their position in the D tier, because this disparity is really quite crazy. Now keep in mind, of course, that it's not all about throughput, because you also have some damage reduction going on. So for example, Paladin with Devotion Aura and Aura Mastery and Sacrifice and so on can probably leverage lower HPS to heal more in terms of reducing damage, which doesn't show up in these. The same cannot be said for Holy Priest and Preservation Evokers, who don't have that much, that many options to reduce incoming damage, and the disparity therefore becomes quite a little bit more dramatic even. But we don't want to go too deep into these considerations here, so we'll keep this based on the raw numbers, so also ranking Holy Paladin in D tier. Now you can argue that this is a representation of different key levels. So Oracle Priest have done higher key levels because there is more damage in higher keys. They need to heal more, and the other ones don't have to heal as much. So naturally the values will be lower if the key level is lower. And to sort of dispel this notion or address it at the very least, we also look at this for level 15 Floodgate dungeons, which all specs are capable of completing, and see how well they perform there on average. And we can see a very similar picture with Oracle Priest on top, Resto Druid slightly behind at negative 5%. Then Shaman catches up a little bit here, but I think it's not enough to override the C tier verdict in terms of healing throughput from the beginning. And the other specializations still are about 20 to 25% behind. We can even see that Preservation Evokers don't even have healing logs, more than 8 healing logs in plus 15 dungeons, which we'll also see in the maximum power representation at the end. So Each of these specializations then gets a point. S tier gives 4 points, A tier gives 3, B tier 2, C tier 1. D tier doesn't give any points, and we'll use these points to generate our overall verdict in the end. Now for damage, we can see that we have a very clear winner here as well, in Mistweaver, being able to deal almost 1,000,000 HPS on average in a +15 dungeon. We don't look at the highest key levels here, because A, of the very small sample size, and B, because the ability to deal damage does not scale with key difficulty. Actually, the inverse might be true a little bit, where if the key is very difficult, it will be more difficult to optimize the damage rotation, so I think a level 15 is pretty fair here. And we can see all the other specializations are really far behind Mistweaver. Paladin is somewhat competitive, well actually not, but they aren't as poorly off as all the others at -26%, and I put all the others in C tier. I mean, with a 40% reduction, you might argue it's also D tier because the disparity is so large, but I think C tier is fine. I don't put anyone in A tier because of the large difference. There's no one even close to Mistweaver Monk in terms of being able to deal damage. Keep in mind, maybe as a side note, these are all Oracle Priest numbers, because that's true for the healing side as well. So Void Weaver is able to deal somewhat more damage, but that would just sort of muddle the comparison. Now what we do here is we take our healing ranking and weight it at 3 times the value of the damage ranking, and we take our new damage ranking, put it on top of it, and arrive at these sort of scores for the healers up to this point. And now we look at representation, which we will also use at a one times weight, so it's not super important what players then actually are doing, but I think it's quite telling as well. So if we look at the top 2,000 keys played in the previous week, we can see that there is a huge representational disparity, with Oracle Priests still, or Discipline Priests still being very, very far ahead of all the others. Not as much as it used to be, but you can see in the highest key levels this is even more the case than in those slightly below them. And we can see that Resto Shamans are somewhat competitive, which is why I placed them in A tier in terms of representation. Then we have a bunch of B tier healers in Druid, Mistweaver and Paladin in terms of representation, and then I jump right to D tier because there's just one player who even managed to get into the top 2,000 keys. This is not a competitive specialization then by any means, so don't think it really justifies the position in C tier for being able to push these keys, because this might just be outliers. That's something that we'll look at with the maximum power considerations then more strongly. So considering this as well, we let this come into our calculations at a weight of 1 times, because as I said, it's not that important. And we can see that we're sort of building up. Oracle Priest is still ahead here, and Mistweaver and Druid seem to be consolidating in second place. But we still need to look at the maximum power. And these are stats from Radar.io leaderboards, looking at the highest performing player of each spec and which key levels they have timed. And we can see only one specialization has timed at 20, that is Discipline Priest, at an average key level for this player of 18.88, placing Discipline Priest in S tier in terms of overall maximum power. Then we have Paladins, despite their low throughput, but just carried by Ellesmere, so there's a huge gap to the second place Paladin, but still also placed in A tier, just slightly below, but not able to time a 20, which Oracle Priests have done, and also Shaman also being able to time a 19, placing them also in A tier, like Paladins. And then we have the specializations who are capable of timing 18, but not 19, which is Druid and Mistweaver. And then we have specializations who aren't able to time 18s at all so far in Holy Priest and Preservation Evoker. And now considering these at the weight of 3, because I think it's very important, maximum power is very important, because you have to sort of balance around maximum power. You can't balance around the 50th healing percentile or something, because then it will just be all over the place. You might even argue that maximum power should be weighted a little bit higher, but either way, there's obviously a little bit of imprecision in these calculations here, but I think it's a pretty good average guess. And we can see that we have a very clear winner in Oracle Priest, Oracle Discipline Priest, putting them straight into S tier. Then we have a group of healers which are significantly lower than Oracle Priest, but are overall performing relatively well in Mistweaver, Druid, as well as Resto Shaman. Then we have some sort of a gap in between with a Holy Paladin, and we have then Holy Priest and Preservation Evoker. Now I would say what I want to do is break out from this a little bit and move Paladin up a little bit because of the ability to time these high keys, and also perhaps the throughput ranking with the mitigation abilities from Paladins is not quite super fair. However, so I put them in A. However, I don't want to close the B tier and move these up, because I think they are so far behind the other healers on all of the metrics. So there is no redeeming quality for Holy Priests at this point, nor is there for Preservation Evokers, perhaps even less so for Preservation Evokers because of the difficulty of the specialization and the restrictions they have to play around. Anyway, if this is my tier list, please comment if you agree, if you disagree, if you have any additional insights into how these specializations play out. If you want to see more content like this, please like the video, drop a subscribe to my channel. And if you want to see some additional healing content I've made, you can watch this video up here. Thank you guys for watching, everybody, and see ya.